20 million soldiers. That's not a typo. That's not propaganda. That's the number Vladimir Putin is now demanding for Russia's military. 20 million men and women pulled from a collapsing economy, from failing businesses, from families already torn apart by 3 years of war. Put this in perspective. Russia's entire active military right now, in February 2026, stands at roughly 1.5 million personnel. Putin is calling for more than 13 times that number. This isn't expansion. This is desperation disguised as strength. But here's what Putin isn't telling anyone. This massive mobilization isn't a sign of Russia's power. It's proof of catastrophic failure. Right now, in February 2026, Russia is losing this war. Not slowly, not gradually, rapidly. And Putin knows that without a dramatic, some would say suicidal escalation, Ukraine will win. This is the single most desperate military gamble of Putin's entire presidency. And we're watching it unfold right now. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to show you exactly why Putin is making this insane demand, why it will likely fail, and what it means for the future of this war. Stay with us. The announcement came quietly at first. No grand speech, no televised address to the nation. Instead, it filtered through Russian military channels in early February 2026, a directive from the Kremlin to military leadership. Prepare for an expansion to 20 million active personnel. Within days, leaked documents began circulating. Internal Russian Defense Ministry communications obtained by investigative journalists in early February 2026 revealed the scope of Putin's plan. Regional military commissariats, recruitment offices, were given quotas, timelines, targets. This wasn't theoretical planning. This was operational mobilization already beginning. And it's not just talk. Across Russia right now, in February 2026, the machinery of mobilization is already grinding into motion. From Moscow to Vladivostok, recruitment centers that had been struggling to meet modest quotas are suddenly being ordered to process thousands, tens of thousands of new conscripts. To understand why Putin is making this demand, you need to understand the scale of Russia's losses. Conservative estimates, as of February 2026, put Russian casualties, killed and wounded, at over 800,000 men. That's more than half of Russia's entire pre-war military strength. Gone, dead, wounded, or missing. But it's not just about numbers. Russia has been burning through experienced soldiers, men who trained for years, who knew their equipment, who could actually fight. Now, current footage from February 2026 shows training centers packed with barely trained conscripts. Men who've never held a rifle. Boys, really. Being sent to replace hardened combat veterans. Here's the problem Putin can't solve. Russia's economy is collapsing right now in February 2026. GDP growth has crashed to essentially zero. The country is headed for recession, and Putin wants to pull 20 million working-age people, mostly men, out of an economy that's already on life support? Russia is already facing a severe labor shortage as of February 2026. Businesses across every sector are desperate for workers. Agriculture is suffering. Construction is stalled. Manufacturing is declining for the 8th straight month. The economy needs more workers, not fewer. But Putin's mobilization would do the opposite. And demographics make it even worse. Russia's population is aging and shrinking. The country already has one of the lowest birth rates in Europe. Working-age men, the exact demographic Putin wants for his military, are increasingly rare. Every man sent to war is one less worker, one less father, one less taxpayer in an economy that desperately needs all three. But here's an even bigger problem. Even if Putin could actually mobilize 20 million men, what would he arm them with? Russia has lost thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and aircraft. Satellite imagery from February 2026 shows Russian equipment storage facilities that were once packed with vehicles now sitting nearly empty. Russian defense production is already running at maximum capacity in February 2026. Factories operate around the clock. They're even pulling Soviet-era equipment out of decades-long storage, trying to make it functional. And still, production can't keep pace with losses on the battlefield. 20 million soldiers would need tanks, rifles, ammunition, uniforms. Russia can barely equip the forces it has now. Training is another catastrophic problem. Proper military training takes months, 6 months minimum, often a year or more for combat-ready soldiers. Current reports from February 2026 show Russian conscripts receiving as little as 2 to 4 weeks of basic training before deployment. They're not soldiers, they're targets. Now multiply that disaster by 20 million. Because here's what awaits these hypothetical 20 million. The battlefield in February 2026 is a killing ground. Modern warfare combining World War I trench brutality with 21st century technology. Drones hunt individual soldiers. Artillery strikes with precision. Ukrainian forces, increasingly well-equipped with Western weapons, defend every meter. And Russians know it. Despite heavy censorship and police crackdowns, protests are erupting across Russia in February 2026. Mothers whose sons already died in Ukraine are demanding answers. Young men are fleeing the country. Social media, accessed through VPNs, shows widespread fear and anger. This isn't the patriotic mobilization Putin imagines. Border crossings tell the real story. Current footage from February 2026 shows Russians fleeing in unprecedented numbers. Finland, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, any border that's open. Young men who would be prime conscription targets are abandoning everything, careers, property, families, to escape Putin's mobilization. This isn't strength. This is a nation eating itself. The international response has been swift and alarmed. NATO convened emergency consultations in early February 2026. Western intelligence agencies are calling this an act of desperation, not strength. Ukrainian officials, speaking just days ago, called it proof that Russia knows it's losing. The consensus: Putin is escalating because conventional victory is impossible. Historical context makes this even more insane. The Soviet Union mobilized millions during World War II, fighting literal Nazis in an existential war for survival. Afghanistan, roughly 100,000 troops. Chechnya, 40,000. Ukraine in 2026? Putin wants 20 million for a war of conquest that's already failed. It's not comparable. It's madness. Russia can't even properly supply the forces it has now in February 2026. Ukrainian strikes systematically destroy Russian logistics. Ammunition runs short. Food supplies are irregular. Fuel deliveries disrupted. Current reports show Russian units rationing basic supplies. And Putin wants to add 19 million more mouths to feed? More ammunition to deliver? More fuel to transport? The logistics are impossible. Command and control is another critical failure. Russia has lost dozens of generals and hundreds of senior officers in this war. As of February 2026, the officer corps is depleted, demoralized, and increasingly incompetent. Junior officers without proper training are commanding units. Communication between units fails regularly. Who would command 20 million troops when you can't even properly command 1 million? Morale is catastrophic. Intercepted communications from February 2026 reveal Russian soldiers begging families to help them escape. Desertion rates are climbing. Entire units have surrendered to Ukrainian forces rather than continue fighting. These are men who enlisted willingly or were mobilized in smaller waves. Imagine the morale of 20 million forced conscripts who don't want to be there. The financial cost is staggering. Russia's military budget is already consuming over 30% of federal spending as of February 2026. The economy is in recession. Oil revenues have collapsed, and Putin wants to add the cost of equipping, training, feeding, and paying 20 million additional soldiers? The numbers don't work. Russia would go bankrupt before the mobilization even completed. Politically, this mobilization could destroy Putin. His grip on power depends on economic stability and public acquiescence. A mobilization of 20 million would shatter both. Oligarchs would see their businesses collapse as workers disappear. The middle class would revolt as sons are drafted. Even Putin's inner circle knows this is suicide. Which raises the question, Is this real, or is it a bluff? Some analysts believe this entire 20 million figure is psychological warfare, a desperate attempt to intimidate Ukraine and the West into negotiations. Putin has bluffed before. Red lines that turned out to be suggestions, ultimatums that were ignored. But whether it's real or a bluff, the fact that Putin feels he needs to make this claim reveals just how badly the war is going for Russia in February 2026. Ukraine's response has been defiant and clear. President Zelensky, speaking in early February 2026, called Putin's mobilization demand the dying gasp of a failed invasion. Ukrainian military planners are preparing not for 20 million Russians, but for the continued degradation of Russian combat effectiveness. They know what Western analysts know. This mobilization can't actually happen. And even if it somehow did, it would take years to implement, years Ukraine will use to grow stronger. And Western support is accelerating, not declining. In February 2026, new aid packages are being announced regularly. Advanced weapon systems are flooding into Ukraine. The very weapons that have been devastating Russian forces are now arriving in greater quantities. Putin's mobilization threat may have had the opposite effect. Instead of intimidating the West, it's strengthening their resolve to ensure Ukraine wins. Military analysts examining the situation in February 2026 see Russia approaching a tipping point, not toward victory, but toward collapse. Every metric, casualties, equipment losses, economic stability, morale, international support, trends against Russia. Putin's 20 million soldier fantasy won't change these fundamentals. You can't mobilize your way out of strategic defeat when you lack equipment, training, logistics, money, and will. Behind every statistic is a human being. Russian mothers who've lost sons, Ukrainian families whose homes are rubble, children growing up in war. As of February 2026, this war has killed hundreds of thousands, displaced millions, and traumatized an entire generation. Putin's demand for 20 million more soldiers means 20 million more families torn apart, 20 million more lives destroyed. For what? For one man's imperial delusions. There are alternatives. Putin could withdraw Russian forces to pre-2022 borders. He could genuinely negotiate. He could accept that Ukraine will never be subjugated and end this catastrophic war. But every indication from February 2026 suggests he won't. His ego won't allow it. So instead, he threatens 20 million more lives to avoid admitting defeat. It's the logic of a dictator who values his pride more than his people. So what actually happens? Over the next few months, we'll see if Putin can mobilize even a fraction of 20 million. Realistic estimates suggest Russia might manage another 500,000 to 1 million conscripts at most, and even that would devastate the economy and face massive resistance. The 20 million figure will likely fade into propaganda history, remembered as the moment Putin's delusions became impossible to hide. Long-term, this mobilization threat, whether real or imagined, marks a turning point. Russia has revealed the depth of its desperation. The war that was supposed to last days has entered its fourth year in 2026, and Russia is talking about mobilizing its entire working-age male population. That's not a nation approaching victory. That's a nation facing the consequences of catastrophic strategic failure. 20 million soldiers. It's a number that reveals everything about where Putin's war stands in February 2026. It shows desperation masquerading as strength. It shows a leader so detached from reality that he thinks bodies can replace strategy, equipment, morale, and economic viability. Most importantly, it shows that Russia is losing, and Putin knows it. The question now isn't whether Russia can mobilize 20 million. It's whether Putin's regime can survive the attempt. One final thought. When dictators face defeat, they sometimes make irrational choices. Putin has already threatened nuclear weapons. Western intelligence agencies are watching closely for signs of desperation moves. The 20 million soldier demand may be bluster, but it's bluster from a man who's running out of options. That makes him dangerous in ways beyond conventional military threats. The world is watching and waiting. This isn't just about Putin's fantasy mobilization. It's about the future of Europe, the credibility of international law, the right of nations to exist free from imperial conquest. In February 2026, Ukraine continues to fight for all of these things. Russia continues to bleed for one man's ego. And 20 million soldiers, real or imagined, won't change the fundamental truth. This war was wrong from the start, and Russia will ultimately lose it. The only question is how many more lives Putin destroys before accepting reality.